menace, the Islamic State group, which threatens the very integrity of the Libyan state.
4 American journalists have been detained in Bahrain. They were on assignment to cover the anniversary of the 2011 uprising there. They've been accused of providing false information, saying they were tourists. Among the group is Anna Therese Day, an award-winning journalist. Bahrain says the 4 were asked and taking part in a demonstration and participating in attacks on police with other rioters. The US Embassy says it's aware of the plight of the 4 journalists, but can't say more due to privacy concerns. Francois Hollande is meeting with David Cameron. The one thing these 2 leaders have in common is a desire to keep the UK, it seems, inside the European Union. They have widely different views on how to achieve that. Cameron is seeking a revision of the UK's membership agreement later this week. Meanwhile, the EU President Donald Tusk said earlier that this is now a crucial moment.
The European Council President on a whistle-stop tour of the continent ahead of a critical summit. After visits to the presidents of France and then Romania, Donald Tusk said Britain's EU negotiations are very fragile and run the risk of irreversibly breaking up the whole 28-member bloc.
It is high time we started listening to each other's arguments more than to our own. It is natural in negotiations that positions harden as we get closer to crunch time. But the risk of breakup is severe, because this process is indeed very fragile. Handle with care, but the problem cannot be met.
Meanwhile, the European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker said that the proposals he has made offers a fair deal for Britain and the other 27 EU members. He demands it to deny benefits to new workers arriving from other EU countries for up to 4 years.
This welfare benefits have to continue to apply to those who are already working for workers. This has to be seen, and the indexation of the charity benefit will be at the core of the discussions we have tomorrow on the private European Council.
The British Prime Minister also visited the EU Palace this Monday as he turned towards the continent on a final push for support in Europe. With the 28 national leaders agreed to a deal, Cameron is expected to call the in-out referendum and campaign to stay in a reformed European Union.
Let's read the images coming in from San Cristobal de las Casas. That's the place where the Pope, as you see in the Bogabilla now, touring the streets, waving to the faithful. This, of course, part of the Pope's visit to Mexico. He's, of course, in San Cristobal de las Casas. And as you say, they're part of this visit to Mexico. Mexico, of course, a very strongly Catholic country. This, though, one of the regions where Catholicism apparently on the retreat in some ways. There's been a surge in evangelical groups and Pentecostal groups. The Pope there to meet people and to we believe a mass will be served in local languages too at some point, but this is very much a situation live. As you see, many people lining the streets all around the region, not just this small section you see here. Let's take a listen to our correspondent, Lauren Greer, who joined us at home.
It seemed done very well to the audience. It seemed to touch the faces very well, saying, we must be forgiven. We have to ask forgiveness for all of these terrible things we've done to Indigenous people. And as you might note, the world needs to learn from Indigenous people. They have a strong, lasting culture, not a disposable, materialistic culture of many people in the world today. But anybody who knows the subject well can see this is really an effort by the Church to try and win back some of these faithful. The Catholic Church thought it had these Indigenous people for many centuries, and now many of them are converted to evangelical Christianity, and it is losing numbers both in Mexico, Guatemala, and many countries across Latin America with big Indigenous populations. He's going to Michoacán state, home of a big fight between vigilantes and cartels, and then to Sierra Juarez, which was the most murderous city in the world until recently, and into a prison there. So it's going to seem very well that he's going to these places that other presidents and nation leaders do not go to. But certainly, some concerns, and he said specifically, he doesn't want any cars with bulletproof armor. So, he's been concerned that he'll be okay, but he's been fine so far.
Well, Rio there speaking to us from Mexico City. Of course, the occasion Pope Francis's visit to Mexico. Just saw the images live there as the Pope makes his way along the state capital there in Chiapas state in San Cristobal de Casas. And of course, as Rio was telling us that he's saying to indigenous Mexicans to accept forgiveness for the exploitation that was vested upon them by those people who colonized Mexico many years ago. Let's move on to the vacuum left at the top of the legal justice system in the United States by the sudden death of the U.S. Supreme Court Judge, Justice Antonin Scalia. It's become an issue now in the presidential election campaign, with the Republicans calling for the next elected leader of the U.S. to be the person who appoints Mr. Scalia's successor. Here from some Catherine Viet has this.
As flags fly at half-mast in remembrance of Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia, Republicans have already come out swinging, vowing to block any successor nominated by President Barack Obama.
President Obama is not going to get the benefit of the doubt from me. Let's see him find a consensus choice. The next president will pick the replacement for Justice Scalia.
As battle lines are being drawn in Congress, the fight has spilled over into the race for the White House, with Republican candidates calling for a delay.
There's a long tradition. You don't do this in an election year.
Meanwhile, Democrats say they're outraged by the Republican stance.
It is outrageous that Republicans in the Senate and on the campaign trail have already pledged to block any replacement that President Obama nominates.
The Constitution is clear. The U.S. President nominates Supreme Court justices and the Senate confirms the candidate. But Republicans want a delay, hoping they'll take back the White House in November, and how the president will be more willing to appoint a conservative justice. As it stands, the remaining justices are evenly split between conservatives and liberals, and Republicans don't want to lose their long-term conservative advantage in shaping policy. And I must say, this fight could have repercussions beyond the presidential election, impacting several key Senate races. Vowing not to consider a nominee opens Republicans up to charges of obstruction, an argument the Democrats are sure to use as they try to win back seats in swing state contests.
Let's remind you now of the main world news headlines here live from Paris. At least 50 civilians are dead, including children. Médecins Sans Frontières says a hospital that's supporting the northern Syria has been destroyed by missiles. The United Nations says 5 medical facilities and 2 schools have been hit in Italy and Aleppo. Kurdish backed through Syria forces have taken the border town from the control of the Islamic State group. The advance pushes closer to the town of Azaz. This while Turkey warns that border town must not be taken. Turkey has been shelling the Kurdish forces since Saturday. Talk of a Brexit heats up. The French President François Hollande, you see here, welcoming the UK's David Cameron to Paris. Cameron here to try to renegotiate Britain's membership of the EU. The tensions have been easy there. Starting off the business, we're going to find it here, I'm pleased to say, beginning with anger in Brussels, where thousands of city workers took to the streets. Tell us what.
Well, this is something that's been brewing for a long time, and we saw that steelworkers were rallying against what they call unfair practices from their Chinese rivals. European firms say that as China's economy has slowed down, steel manufacturers there have had to find a place to offload their product. Chinese imports have flooded the EU market, leading to plunging prices, a practice known as dumping. As Charles Bodon reports, European steelworkers say their livelihood is under threat.
Employees and employers of the European steel industry marching side by side, united in their struggle against the dumping practices of their Chinese competitors. Thanks to heavy subsidies, Chinese steel production has boomed, leading to oversupply in Europe and a drop in prices.
With 400 million economic capacity, it's not difficult to destroy the industry for 100 million per year. But there should be import practices on subsidized steel. This is the goal.
Chinese steel imports to the EU have soared from 4.5 million tons in 2014 to a projected figure of 7 million tons for last year. This has caused the price of steel to fall from 600 euros per ton last summer to 350 euros per ton currently. Overproduction isn't the only issue. Members of the European steel community believe that differing industry regulations have also played their part in moving the gain in China's favor.
In Europe, we have to pay for CO2 certificates, which is not the case for China. In China, the amounts of CO2 that are emitted per ton of steel are higher than in Europe, and it is imported without any taxation.
The protests were also held to stop China from being granted the status of a market economy by the World Trade Organization. They claim this would grant Chinese steel unfettered access to European markets and would push European steel closer to the brink.
Studies suggest that 3.5 million jobs will be at risk when this will happen.
The European steel industry has received the support of many European officials, such as French Economy Minister Emmanuel Macron. The UK government, on the other hand, has opposed measures combating Chinese dumping with the goal of nurturing the trade relations between the two countries.
So the necessary legislation. Staying in Brussels, more stimulus could be on the way from the European Central Bank. ECB President Mario Draghi said he will not hesitate to act to do what's necessary to lift inflation, which stands at 0.4% in the Eurozone, off the ECB's target of 2%. But also on the agenda were Europe's banks. Since the start of the year, European bankers have lost almost 25% of their value. But the ECB president says their stocks are trading well below their actual value and are not overly exposed to falling commodity prices which have battered emerging markets.
They're playing like a little game, tag the red, tag
Banks
the
are in a
red.
better place than they were in the banking crisis from a few years ago.
What were they doing before?
The situation in
Where
the
are they
banking
parents?
sector now is very different from what it was in 2012. Perhaps most importantly, euro area banks have significantly strengthened their
might be
capital
little-
positions over the past few years, notably as a consequence of the comprehensive assessment conducted in 2014.
The European markets ended higher after Draghi's remark. Across the board up over 2%. In Paris, the CAC 40 finished up over 3%. Banks seeing a rebound as are some mining and natural resources firms. HSBC ending up higher after it announced it would stay in London and not move to Hong Kong. The first train to connect China and Iran arrived in Tehran on Monday, loaded with Chinese goods. Iran railway officials said it marks a revival of the ancient Silk Road. The road took 14 days to make the 9,500-kilometer journey through Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan, but officials say they have an even grander vision for the future.
So that was it, like what time was it? That
This
was
railroad will not
59.
only be used to deliver goods
12:19.
to Tehran.
Let's do the 2 to 3,
We hope that in the near
4
future,
o'clock now almost?
we can create a railroad that
Can't
goes
see
from
Manhattan,
Shanghai
why?
to Europe, passing through Iran.
Is it snow? Is it fire? What is it?
Staying with an automotive theme, but a bit flashier. Perhaps the closest James Bond ever came to the perfect marriage was with his Aston Martin.
That makes me
You have
nervous.
to keep your hands on one too. That is, if your pockets are deep enough.
I
An
like
option
to
of
stop.
James Bond cops and memorabilia from the movie Spectre was
It's
released
only
on
not
Thursday,
long.
including the Aston Martin DB10 that's expected to start the all of it.
Traditionally been Aston Martin's explode finger.
Well, thank you very much indeed.
Government success.
And so you have
As flags fly at half-mast in remembrance of Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia, Republicans have already come out swinging. That to block any success nominated by President Barack Obama.
President Obama is not going to admit the doubt to make. Let's see if I can sense yours. The next verse. Request from Justice Scalia.
As battle lines are being drawn in Congress, the president spilled over into the race in the White House, with Republican candidates calling for a delay.
There's a long tradition. This election year.
Meanwhile, Democrats say they're outraged by the Republican stance. It is outrageous that Republicans in the Senate and on the campaign trail have already pledged to block any replacement that President Obama nominates. The Constitution.
He was visiting the state of Chiapas today, but what he's been very much drawing attention to, one of the poorest places in Mexico. That's right, and he's been really drawing attention to the social problems in Mexico, inequality, and indeed spoke very much in favour of the indigenous populations of Mexico, which he had a special mass for, and saying indeed that they deserve to be apologised to. So that's one issue we've been drawing attention to. Also, of course, the much spoken about issue of drug cartels and the social problems they create. He visited the Mexico City suburb of Ecatepec, which has a really big problem of homicide, in particular affecting women. And as USA Today points out here, really no-go areas, so the Pope wouldn't have got to see it. But at least it's drawing attention to it because he went into this district, 1.6 million people in that part of Mexico City, with a huge problem of crime and homicide linked to the drug cartels.
It's almost like it's taking a spike out of her, but I suspect what he's learned about Pope Francis since he became Pope, that it's something that he would be interested in to see. He probably went to those kind of areas during his time as a humble priest. He still sees himself as a humble priest, doesn't he? And of course, the issue is security, isn't it? You can't guarantee the security.
Absolutely, and in terms of what he said, I suppose the message did get out there that etc. In any case, moving on to another book who's been in the news today for entirely different reasons. This is a BBC Panorama expose, if that's the word, about a friendship between John Paul II and Anna Teresa Timianeka. Now, they had a 32-year friendship. It was a correspondence. It was very much a lot of affection between the two. She was a philosopher, I believe, and they collaborated on projects together. An intense relationship. What do you mean by intense? It's a bit unfair. I think because it turns out she did unveil in letters that she was in love with Vane. He was a cardinal at the time, I believe, or Archbishop of Krakow. But John Paul II at that time said, well, I have nothing to say. There's nothing I can respond to that. So I think it's a little bit unfair because it has been cast by some as, they're certainly insinuating that it was more by the headlines, but in fact it wasn't. Now, apparently he only replied to her letters when he was outside of Poland, because Poland at the time was behind the Iron Curtain, and the Catholic Church was very much a target of the Polish secret services at the time. His phone was tapped, etc. So it could have been used against him if he had been perhaps imprudent enough to reply to the letters in Poland.